Boom. All right, we're at this thing again. As promised, I'm getting back to you with more stuff, expanding on the video I just did of the introduction to structured training for endurance mountain bike racing. So as stated in that video, which there'll be a link below for that one, there are three basic types of rides that I'm going to be addressing for training for enduro mountain bike training. That's aerobic, anaerobic, and VO2 max. So with this video, what I wanted to do is just expand on those three types of rides and give you some examples of those types of rides. So again, I'm gonna try and keep this relatively quick. Aerobic. Let me give you some examples of aerobic type rides. So as stated in that video, the first video I did, these are easy tempo, steady state rides. So if you think about like what your heart rate's doing, you're gonna have an upper end set and you're never gonna go beyond that point. That might be 140 beats per minute or a 3 or a 4 on my perceived exertion scale. So as you're riding, you might have small, increases and decreases in heart rate, but you're never going into that next zone. These would be at least over an hour. I'd say for most people when you're in shape and such, these things are gonna be 2 and 3 hours long to be effective for that. In the same realm of the aerobic type rides too would be, I wanted to just brush up on this one too, would be the recovery ride, because a recovery ride would be at similar heart rate zones or maybe a little lower on the perceived exertion scale, but you're gonna try and cap that at probably just 60 minutes. And what a recovery ride would be is, say you raced on Sunday and you're kind of beat up, you should be back on the bike on Monday and you should do a 60-minute recovery ride. Me personally, I don't like doing those on the bike because they're boring as hell. So I'll go and sit on the spin bike or the trainer, because if I'm just gonna sit and do a really slow tempo ride for an hour, I'd rather watch a movie on my iPad or something like that, listen to some tunes, check emails, veg on Instagram. It doesn't matter. That's good times for the recovery ride. The whole purpose of a recovery ride too is the blood giveth and the blood taketh away. So what you're trying to do is get all that metabolic waste and crap out of your muscles, and you will feel better. I've done rides as short as 30 minutes and legs start feeling better after that. Like I said, you'll be riding and you'll feel like garbage, and then at some point in time during that 60 minutes, you'll feel less like garbage. That is a recovery ride, also in that low intensity zone of aerobic training. Next one that we're gonna bump up to is the anaerobic ride. So where the aerobic ride stops, the anaerobic ride begins. So with that, obviously you're not gonna wanna jump into just doing some type of anaerobic interval right from the get-go. You want some type of warm-up in your ride, 10, 15, 30 minutes, depending on overall duration of your ride, because if you just jump right into it, you're gonna feel like shit, and you shouldn't. So with this, now think we're aerobic ended, so we'll say 140 beats per minute or 3 or 4 on the perceived exertion scale. That's where your training interval begins. Now for this one, I would say that your interval would start at 5 to 7 minutes and go up to 60 minutes maybe. I mean, that's an effective zone for anaerobic training. Your average mountain bike ride, I would say, would be in the anaerobic zone. I would say when doing these and specifying a certain time interval, you might find that you're trying to stay consistently in that zone for longer periods of time. So that'd be the only difference between your average mountain bike ride, where you're gonna stop and take a little breather or something like that. Recovery, you can have spikes and drops in the heart rate, but for the duration of the interval, if you drop below 140 or that 3-4 on the perceived exertion scale, you're not effectively training that anaerobic energy system. So just something to think about with that. Again, above the anaerobic zone for the duration of the interval, anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes to an hour under certain situations. Anaerobic, boom. All right, the next one we got is VO2 max. And this one is a good one, and you have to pay a little bit more attention to this, and it's going to be harder to truly do this because terrain, and there's a lot of different ways of training your VO2 max, and I think it would be your best interest to kind of identify some of your weaknesses. And this is where some sport specificity comes into, and understanding, you know, an enduro run, more of the local races that I do might be like 5 minutes, and you go do like a BME or a California enduro and you're 17 minutes. So it's just understanding that would kind of dictate how long you're going to be training this. But VO2 max would be like your maximum cardio output. So with this, it's going to be a shorter duration of very intensive exercise. And I would go as far as race run length with this one. So you're going up to maybe 15 minutes, which by definition might be a little beyond that, and it might be really, really hard. But I still, with VO2 max, I think race run falls under that one. I try to not do that on anaerobic days, because when I'm practicing race runs, it's 100% focus and 100% hammer time, and then I want to recover for a long period of time after that. Whereas anaerobic, I'm going to try and keep that heart rate up and keep going. So with the VO2 max, what your heart rate or your perceived exertion is going to look like with that is there's going to be a big spike to, you know, basically holding your heart rate at as high as you can for the duration of that interval. So if you're doing a 1 minute interval, that better be really fucking high. And if you're doing a 15-minute interval, it better be really fucking high, as high as you can for 15 minutes. Most of the VO2 stuff, though, that you're going to be doing is going to be 1, 2, 3, maybe 7 minutes on stuff like that. But the big difference with this would be long recovery after that. So some examples of this would be like, if you wanted to do some sprints, I would find some flat ground, and that's where you're gonna do your interval at. You're gonna sprint for your 3 to 5 minutes or something like that. All out sprint as hard as you can. Set a little timer on your watch, and then you're gonna do an easy ride back to maybe 6 times the duration of the sprint. You should feel fully recovered, or if you're looking at your heart rate, you're breathing easy, your legs are not screaming at you, all that other stuff. So that would be an example of just doing kind of like sprint type training, which there's lots of different stuff that you can do with that, which we'll get into. Another one would be, like I said, race runs. That's a great opportunity to do that. And looking at some of my heart rates, I'm hitting some of my highest heart rates actually going downhill. I'll be consistently high going uphill, but some of my peak heart rates happen coming downhill. So if you establish a run, 2 to 15 minutes or something like that, it would be absolute hammer time throughout that entire run, to which you're going to give yourself plenty of recovery after that. Man, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I am going to go back to the aerobic, because that was a couple examples of the VO2. I didn't touch on this, but with the aerobic, that's your LSD, your long, slow distances. So that's like, your long ride over 2 hours or something like that. It could just be a general mountain bike ride where you're keeping your heart rate down under that zone 2. Another one that I did is for like in-season enduro training. I found a really cool area where I'm getting about 10-minute runs downhill, and then I have a pavement road to ride back up. The downhill is, like I said, about 10 minutes. The ride back up takes about 40 minutes. So with that, I'm getting a long riding, because I'll do that for 2 hours. I might do like 4 laps and get 6,000 feet of climbing in the day, and I'll go, not 80% on the way back down. So I got a 10-minute chunk of that, and then I got 40 minutes to which I'm keeping it under that 140 beats per minute and cruising. And I think that's effective aerobic training too, but I'm still kind of staying up on the skill set a bit. So like I said, this is, when you really get into this, there's a lot of different ways of working all 3 of those. Like if you had a road bike, you could do aerobic, anaerobic, and VO2 max. Things that I would advise you on as far as VO2 max stuff on the road bike, just because the bar width is different, the cranks and the gears and body positioning are slightly different. If you're really trying to get as much of that power to carry over onto the bike, if you're close to your race season, I would do all your VO2 max on what you're racing on, just because power delivery is going to be slightly different based on those factors. But a road bike would be a very good addition to the training. especially, like I said, for the aerobic and anaerobic, just because for anaerobic, you have a really good opportunity at watts over time, which is one of the harder things to do on a mountain bike because of the undulation in terrain that you don't see as much of on the road bike. And then with the VO2 max, if you got a gym membership, I think that's a great opportunity to do VO2 max training in the gym, just because you can control, you're in a controlled setting, so you can get a really high peak in your heart rate on variable pieces of equipment, the skier, the rower, the Versa climber, the Aerodyne bike, all that other stuff. So you can get the heart rate up extremely fast and work very intensive intervals, and you have the opportunity to recover because you're not out riding, you're not in the elements, you can drink water, you can kick back and really hone in on kicking ass at your interval. In addition to that, if you're riding 5 and 6 times a week, your body is developing an asymmetry towards the muscle movements and firing sequences of muscles to riding. It's a great opportunity to get in and mix that up by using some of these other pieces of equipment that are developing other parts of your body. And you're still training, but you're not wearing out your nervous system to repetitious movements. And you know, you're engaging your core and all this other stuff. So I think VO2 max in the gym is great. Damn, I'm all over the place. That other topic, one thing I wanted to mention too, another thing in the gym, if you're doing like a spin class, which is also very good, that's going to fall under the anaerobic zone. So maybe I was all over the place with this one. I think there's some good stuff in there. So that's breaking down the 3 basic types of rides. Again, I mentioned that in the first blog. The next one I'm going to do is talking a little bit more about the structure of your rides, macro, microcycle training, that type of stuff, deload weeks, the actually, you know, now that you understand the need for it and the energy systems that you're working, you need to put it together in a program. So that'll be the next one coming your way. Like I said, hopefully I get these things out to you in a semi-quick basis. I'm trying. But again, if you found this helpful, give it a like, leave a comment if you have questions. I'm on there. I'm answering your questions. All this stuff will be on my blog, robrides.com. And thank you very much.